2026 is not waiting for you to feel ready. It's waiting for you to decide whether this will be another year of starting strong and stopping early, or the year you finally become consistent with the person you know you, capable of being. Ladies and gentlemen, as we step into 2026, let me ask you a powerful question. What if this is the year you finally stop starting over? Not the year you try harder, not the year you feel more motivated, but the year you become consistent with yourself. Because here's the truth. Most people avoid. You don't fail because you lack talent. You don't fail because you lack opportunity. You fail because inconsistency quietly erodes your potential. Consistency does not start with what you do. It starts with who you believe you are. When you see yourself as someone who tries, you try. When you see yourself as someone who finishes, you finish. Your actions will always align with your identity. So in 2026, don't ask, what should I do? Ask, who must I become? Most people quit because they're unclear. Unclear goals create weak commitment. If your goal is vague, your effort will be optional. But when your vision is specific, your behavior becomes intentional. Clarity eliminates negotiation. You don't debate with clarity, you obey it. People overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can do in a year. Consistency is not about intensity, it's about alignment. One disciplined decision repeated daily will outperform talent every time. Success is rented, and rent is due every single day. Discipline isn't something you wait for. It's something you practice. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. If you want consistency in 2026, stop relying on emotions and start building structure. Emotions change. Systems compound. Everything in your life either fuels you or drains you. Consistency dies in environments full of distraction, tolerance, and excuses. If it costs you your peace, your progress, or your purpose, it's too expensive. What you allow will continue. What you protect will grow. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you build trust with yourself, and confidence is simply self-trust in motion. You don't need applause. You don't need permission. You need integrity with yourself, because the strongest version of you is the one who does what they said they would do, especially when no one is watching. So as you move into 2026, remember this. Consistency isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. Be consistent long enough, and your habits will introduce you to a version of yourself you've been waiting to meet. Consistency starts with identity, not motivation, because motivation is emotional and identity is foundational. Motivation comes and goes depending on how you feel, what happened yesterday, who encouraged you, or who disappointed you. Identity, on the other hand, is who you believe you are at your core, and human beings will always act in alignment with who they believe they are, even when it's uncomfortable. If you see yourself as someone who tries, you will try until it gets hard. If you see yourself as someone who is disciplined, you will show up even when the results are slow. Most people fail to stay consistent, not because they lack desire, but because their identity is misaligned with their goals. They want outcomes that belong to one identity while living from another. You cannot consistently perform at a level higher than how you see yourself. That's why temporary motivation creates temporary results. But a clear identity creates permanent behavior. When identity is weak, everything becomes a negotiation. You negotiate with the alarm clock. You negotiate with your habits. You negotiate with your standards. But when identity is strong, decisions are already made. A person who identifies as healthy doesn't debate whether to work out. It's simply what they do. A person who identifies as reliable doesn't look for excuses. They look for solutions. Identity removes friction because it simplifies choice. Instead of asking, do I feel like doing this today? The question becomes, what does someone like me do in this situation? That shift is powerful because it moves you from emotional decision-making to principle-based living. Many people are addicted to motivation because it feels good. It's exciting. It gives a temporary sense of progress. But motivation without identity is like fuel without an engine. It burns fast and goes nowhere. Identity, however, is the engine that keeps moving even when fuel is low. This is why consistency often shows up strongest on the days you don't feel like it. Those days reveal who you truly believe you are. Anyone can be consistent when they're inspired. The real transformation happens when consistency becomes automatic, when effort turns into habit, and habit turns into character. Your identity is shaped by the promises you keep to yourself. Every time you do what you said you would do, you cast a vote for the person you are becoming. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you reinforce an identity of inconsistency. Over time, these votes compound into self-trust or self-doubt. Consistency, then, is not just about productivity. It's about integrity. It's about becoming someone you can rely on. When you trust yourself, discipline becomes easier because you no longer want to betray the version of you you're building. To stay consistent in 2026, the question is not how to stay motivated longer, but how to upgrade your identity. Decide who you are before life decides for you. Write it down, speak it out loud, act in alignment with it, even when it's inconvenient. Because once consistency becomes part of who you are, not something you chase, you stop starting over. You stop relying on hype. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. And you begin showing up, not because you feel like it, but because it's simply who you are. Clarity creates commitment because the human mind commits fully only to what it clearly understands. When goals are vague, effort becomes optional. When direction is unclear, discipline feels unnecessary. Most people believe they struggle with commitment, but in reality, they struggle with confusion. They say they want to be successful, healthy, consistent, or fulfilled, yet they cannot clearly define what those words mean in their daily lives. You cannot commit to a blur. The mind resists ambiguity because it cannot measure progress or justify sacrifice without a clear destination. Clarity removes doubt, and doubt is the enemy of commitment. When you lack clarity, everything feels heavy. You wake up unsure of what matters most, so you default to what feels easiest. You get distracted not because you're weak, but because your priorities are undefined. Clarity acts like a filter. It helps you say no without guilt and yes without hesitation. When you know exactly what you're building, you stop wasting energy on what doesn't align. Commitment becomes natural because your actions are anchored to a purpose, not to pressure or external expectations. Clear goals create internal authority. When you know exactly what you want and why you want it, you no longer need constant reminders or motivation from others. You stop waiting for permission to act. You stop seeking validation. Your clarity becomes your command center. Decisions become faster, cleaner, and less emotional. Instead of debating options, you execute plans. Instead of reacting to circumstances, you respond with intention. Clarity transforms effort into focus, and focus multiplies results. Many people confuse clarity with certainty, but clarity does not require knowing every step. It requires knowing the direction. You don't need the full map to commit. You need a defined destination. Once the destination is clear, the path reveals itself through action. Commitment grows as clarity deepens, and clarity deepens as you take responsibility for your choices. This is why people who write their goals down, speak them aloud, and visualize them daily outperform those who keep everything in their heads. Clarity strengthens memory, reinforces belief, and aligns behavior. Clarity also sets standards, and standards protect commitment. When standards are unclear, excuses feel justified. But when standards are defined, excuses lose their power. You stop asking, can I get away with this? And start asking, does this align with who I said I would be? Clear standards eliminate emotional loopholes. They turn consistency into a non-negotiable agreement with yourself. This is where discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like self-respect. In 2026, commitment will not come from trying harder or pushing longer. It will come from seeing clearer. Take time to define what success looks like for you, not for society, not for social media, not for people who don't live your life. Define your goals in measurable terms. Define your values in practical behaviors. Define your priorities in daily actions. When clarity becomes your foundation, commitment stops being something you chase and becomes something you live. Daily decisions compound into destiny because life is not shaped by one defining moment, but by thousands of small choices made consistently over time. People often wait for a breakthrough, a turning point, or a life-changing opportunity, not realizing that their future is being quietly constructed in the ordinary moments of each day. What you choose to do when no one is watching, when the task feels insignificant, and when the reward feels distant is what ultimately determines where you end up. Destiny is not dramatic, it is deliberate. It is the accumulated result of daily decisions repeated long enough to become habits, and habits repeated long enough to become character. Most people underestimate the power of small decisions because the results are not immediate. Skipping one workout does not change your body. Avoiding one difficult conversation does not destroy a relationship. Procrastinating one task does not ruin a career. But these decisions rarely happen once. They happen repeatedly, and repetition is what gives them power. Just as interest compounds in a bank account, behavior compounds in real life. What seems harmless today becomes costly tomorrow, and what seems insignificant now becomes decisive later. The direction of your life is determined not by what you do occasionally, but by what you do consistently. Daily decisions shape your identity long before they shape your outcomes. Each choice is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. When you choose discipline, you reinforce self-trust. When you choose comfort, you reinforce avoidance. Over time, these choices become automatic. You no longer think about them, you simply act according to the patterns you've installed. This is why destiny often feels inevitable in hindsight. People say, it just happened, when in reality, it was built slowly through daily alignment or daily neglect. The danger is that daily decisions rarely feel important in the moment. Comfort is always more tempting than growth because comfort offers immediate relief, while growth demands delayed gratification. But delayed gratification is the currency of success. The ability to consistently choose what benefits you long-term over what feels good short-term is what separates those who progress from those who repeat the same year over and over. You don't drift into excellence, you drift into mediocrity. Excellence is chosen daily, intentionally, and often quietly. Daily decisions also determine momentum. One good choice makes the next one easier. One poor choice makes the next one more likely. Momentum does not care whether it's positive or negative, it simply amplifies whatever direction you're moving in. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A small positive decision made daily creates forward motion that eventually becomes unstoppable. You don't need to overhaul your entire life in one day. You need to make one better decision today, then repeat it tomorrow. In 2026, your destiny will not be decided by what you promise, post, or plan, but by what you practice. Pay attention to your routines, your habits, and your daily standards. Ask yourself what your current decisions are compounding into. If you don't like the trajectory, change the inputs. Change the decisions, because when you honor the power of daily choices, you stop waiting for destiny to arrive and start deliberately creating it. Discipline is a skill you train, not a trait you're born with, and believing otherwise is one of the most damaging myths people carry. When people say, I'm just not disciplined, what they're really saying is, I haven't trained this muscle. No one is born disciplined any more than they're born fluent in a language or strong in a gym. Discipline is developed through repetition, practice, and intentional discomfort. The problem is that most people treat discipline like a personality trait instead of a skill set. So when it doesn't show up naturally, they assume it never will. That belief becomes a self-fulfilling limitation. Skills are built through exposure and consistency, not perfection. Discipline begins small, with actions so simple they feel almost insignificant. Waking up when you said you would, finishing what you started, doing the task even when the mood is wrong. Each of these moments is a training session. The goal is not to be perfect, the goal is to be repeatable. Every time you follow through, you strengthen your ability to do it again. Every time you quit early, you weaken it. Over time, your tolerance for effort increases, and what once felt difficult becomes normal. One of the biggest reasons people struggle with discipline is because they wait to feel ready. But readiness is not a prerequisite for discipline. Action is. Discipline is often built in the absence of confidence, not because of it. You don't become disciplined by feeling disciplined. You become disciplined by acting when it's uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unrewarded. Those moments are not setbacks, they are the workout. Just like physical strength grows under resistance, discipline grows under pressure. Environment plays a critical role in discipline development. Expecting discipline to survive in a chaotic environment is unrealistic. This is why systems matter more than willpower. Willpower is limited, but systems are sustainable. When you design your environment to support good decisions, discipline becomes easier to practice. Structure reduces friction. Clear routines remove decision fatigue. When discipline is supported by systems, it stops feeling like a constant battle and starts feeling like a rhythm. Training discipline also requires patience with yourself. Skills improve gradually, not instantly. Most people quit training discipline because they expect immediate mastery, but growth happens in layers. You improve your ability to do hard things by doing slightly harder things consistently. Discipline expands as your capacity expands. What overwhelms you today may be effortless 6 months from now if you keep showing up. In 2026, the question is not whether you are disciplined enough, but whether you are willing to train discipline daily. Stop labeling yourself as inconsistent or undisciplined. Labels lock behavior. Instead, adopt the mindset of a learner. Treat every follow-through as progress and every failure as feedback. Because once you understand that discipline is a skill, you stop judging yourself and start building yourself. And that is where real consistency begins. Protect your energy like an asset, because everything you want to build in life is powered by it. Time gets a lot of attention, but energy is the real currency. You can have all the time in the world, but without energy, focus, and clarity, nothing meaningful gets done. Energy determines how you show up, how you think, how you decide, and how consistently you execute. When your energy is drained, discipline feels heavy, clarity fades, and even simple tasks feel overwhelming. This is why protecting your energy is not selfish, it is strategic. Most people lose energy not through one big mistake, but through constant leakage. Distractions, unnecessary conversations, unresolved conflicts, poor boundaries, and overcommitment quietly drain mental and emotional reserves. You may not notice it immediately, but over time, this depletion shows up as procrastination, irritability, inconsistency, and burnout. When your energy is constantly being spent on things that don't align with your priorities, you have nothing left for what actually matters. The issue is not lack of ability, it is misallocated energy. What you tolerate determines what you repeat. Tolerating chaos, disrespect, distraction, or misalignment sends a message to your subconscious about what is acceptable. Over time, tolerance becomes normal and normal becomes permanent. Protecting your energy means setting standards for how you work, who you give access to, and what you allow into your mental space. It means understanding that not every opportunity deserves your attention and not every opinion deserves your emotional response. Focus is preserved by boundaries, not by willpower. Energy is also deeply connected to environment. The spaces you work in, the people you spend time with, and the information you consume all shape your mental state. A cluttered environment creates mental noise. Negative conversations create emotional drag. Constant comparison creates internal pressure. Protecting your energy requires intentional design. When your environment supports clarity, discipline becomes easier. When your environment is chaotic, consistency becomes exhausting. You don't rise to your goals. You sink to the level of your surroundings. Rest is another critical part of energy protection, and it is often misunderstood. Rest is not quitting, it is refueling. High performers are not those who work nonstop, but those who recover intentionally. Without proper rest, effort becomes inefficient and mistakes multiply. Protecting your energy means knowing when to push and when to pause. It means recognizing that burnout is not a badge of honor, but a warning sign. Sustainable success requires sustainable energy. In 2026, protecting your energy will be a competitive advantage. The ability to stay focused in a distracted world, calm in a noisy environment, and consistent under PR, it sure will separate those who progress from those who stay stuck. Treat your energy like an investment. Spend it intentionally. Guard it fiercely. Align it with your priorities. Because when your energy is protected, your consistency strengthens, your decisions improve, and your growth becomes inevitable. Consistency is a form of self-respect, because the way you treat your commitments to yourself shapes how you see yourself. Every promise you make internally carries weight, even if no one else hears it. When you repeatedly break those promises, you quietly teach yourself that your word does not matter. Over time, this erodes confidence, not because you lack ability, but because you lack trust in yourself. Self-respect is not built through affirmations or external praise. It is built through alignment between what you say and what you do. Consistency is that alignment in action. Most people associate self-respect with how they allow others to treat them, but it begins with how they treat themselves. If you constantly ignore your own standards, postpone your own goals, and dismiss your own intentions, you reinforce the belief that your needs and aspirations are negotiable. This internal disregard eventually shows up externally. People who don't respect themselves struggle to set boundaries, follow through, or demand better for their lives. Consistency corrects this. Each time you show up as planned, even when it's inconvenient, you send a clear message to yourself: I matter, my goals matter, my word matters. Consistency also builds emotional stability. When you can rely on yourself, your confidence becomes grounded instead of fragile. You stop depending on motivation, validation, or approval to feel capable. You know who you are because your behavior proves it daily. This kind of confidence is quiet but powerful. It doesn't fluctuate based on mood or circumstance. It comes from repeated evidence that you can be trusted to do what you said you would do. That trust becomes the foundation for resilience, discipline, and long-term growth. Self-respect through consistency does not mean perfection. It means integrity. It means when you fall short, you correct course instead of quitting. It means you hold yourself accountable without shame and encourage yourself without excuses. People who respect themselves don't abandon themselves at the first sign of difficulty. They understand that growth is uncomfortable and that discomfort is not a signal to stop, but a signal to strengthen. Consistency teaches you to stay present with effort, not just outcomes. Over time, consistency changes how you experience life. Goals stop feeling overwhelming because you approach them one step at a time. Fear loses its grip because action replaces overthinking. Regret diminishes because you know you are honoring your potential daily. The more consistent you become, the less you tolerate mediocrity in any area of your life. You raise your standards not out of pressure, but out of respect for who you are becoming. In 2026, consistency will be one of the purest expressions of self-respect you can practice. Not because it impresses others, but because it restores trust within yourself. When you respect yourself enough to show up consistently, you no longer chase confidence. You embody it. And from that place, progress becomes natural, discipline becomes sustainable, and your life begins to reflect the value you place on yourself. As we move into 2026, remember this: consistency is not about doing more, proving more, or becoming someone else overnight. It is about honoring who you say you are every single day in small but meaningful ways. When you choose identity over motivation, clarity over confusion, daily discipline over occasional effort, and self-respect over excuses, you stop living in cycles and start building momentum. You realize that your future is not waiting to be discovered. It is waiting to be demonstrated. You don't need a perfect plan, perfect conditions, or perfect confidence. You need alignment. Alignment between your values and your actions. Alignment between your goals and your habits. Alignment between your words and your behavior. When that alignment becomes consistent, progress becomes inevitable. So let 2026 be the year you stop starting over. Let it be the year you keep your promises to yourself, protect your energy, and show up even when it's uncomfortable. Because the most powerful version of you is not the most talented or the most motivated, it's the most consistent. And when you commit to consistency, you don't just change what you do, you change who you become.